Diagram for Lesson 41, covering 4 books of Old Testament wisdom literature. We had a glimpse into the window of wisdom with Tobit in our last lesson, and now we're taking on 114 chapters in 4 books. Well, you recall that we start this whole series out by calling it an overview of the Bible. When you take an overview, that is like flying from the East Coast to the West, traversing across the plains, seeing St. Louis sitting there on the Mississippi, going over the mountains, either the Appalachians in the east or the Rockies in the west, visiting perhaps or flying over the great dripping forests of Washington State, the beaches of California, the vineyards, but you don't get down and do anything in those places. It's simply an overview. And that is certainly what we're doing right now with 114 chapters in 4 books. It is an overview. But it is also a clue of how to continue your study of these books. They are very valuable in giving direction for our daily life, just as we saw Tobit relying on little wisdom sayings in order to put together what was happening to him and to his family. And of course there was always for him, as there is for us, an angelic guardian who comes to us with cures for both supernatural ailments and natural ailments, all wrapped up in wisdom. Wisdom. The Greeks have influenced the world, even though the Jews held firm that God, even as on this diagram, God is the center of everything, the reason for everything, and only in God do we live wholly and whole. The Greeks tried to eliminate that and put man at the center, and it was firmly resisted. However, there is a spirit there of the Greeks that has helped even the Jews to re-establish a belief in the dignity of the human being. He is not God, but he is very much beloved of God, and he needs to know the ways of God in order to be the very best human being he can be. For only God will make his life worthwhile and enjoyable. That is the key to understanding wisdom literature. And here we have, well, first of all, you have those 114 chapters. Your lesson assumes that you're in a class and that you take one section that has been mapped out there, and that you read those different references and get a smattering from each of the books. So as you're no longer in a class, it's not a class, you're an individual, I assume, you take one of those sections and do that. And then you will have a little picture in your mind of what these books are all about. And you can go back to them in your studies and in your prayer time, because they are very rich. We saw with Tobit that it was the wisdom that was to be gained was to help in the daily life of an ordinary Jewish family. To make this more concrete, I hope you've all seen A Fiddler on the Roof, because Reb Tevye and his wife, Golda, and their 4 daughters live in this realm of wisdom. That is their religious a way of dealing with their life. They have little sayings that they live by, tradition. If it is not in some kind of a maxim someplace, they don't know it. It has to be a word that gives them direction in life. Even the title, Fiddler on the Roof. That is a little maxim. Life is like a fiddler on the roof. Your footing is unsure. You try to be joyful. You try to go on singing your songs, but you don't know when your foot will slip. Life is like a fiddler on the roof. That is a maxim. That is a little saying to help you understand. You have a picture in your mind about what that's like. And that's how these devout Jews over the centuries have dealt with all of the problems that have fallen upon them. They are no longer going back, as the diagram shows you up at the top. God has spoken through the prophets. Hard words through Moses, through Joshua, through all of the great prophets of old, Ezekiel being near the end. Also a spokesman for apocalyptic eschatology, which we saw, is heavy stuff. It's not the stuff that will help you today. It is dealing with cosmic things. They are words to the nations. They are difficult to live with. But the God of the wisdom maxim, the wisdom literature, He is more down on our level of need. Those words are practical. God speaks to us in practical terms. He deals with us more personally, just as that wind of the Greeks has helped us feel more important as human beings. It's personal. It's also fatherly. This is the advice given by a concerned father to his sons. Often it is in just that kind of a phrase. It isn't vivid. It isn't scary. It's just common sense. It's like the fiddler on the roof. It is comfortable to live with because we understand it. This kind of thing in Israel through these last years before the fifth kingdom, before the fifth kingdom that is promised, is learned through a teacher generally. The book of Proverbs talks about going to a teacher, sitting at a teacher's feet, and learning these maxims, these parables, these ways of grasping with life by these little maxims. And so it is a very dogmatic education. You simply go and memorize. You don't have to think deeply. You don't have to analyze. You don't have to bring your questions and your skepticism to this class. No, that's not what it's for. It's for you to sit at the feet of a very knowledgeable and wise man and learn the words he will give you to deal with your daily life. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at in these 4 important books of the Bible called wisdom literature. As we said, Tobit opened the door, and next lesson, Job will actually tie it all together. So let's look at these that are here in front of us. First of all, there's Proverbs. This spans most of Israel's history. It comes from several sources. Some of them, no doubt, are from Solomon himself, who was well known and respected as a very wise king. Some are actually from Egypt, where there are records of these kinds of polished proverbs covering every aspect of life and relationship. And the book of Proverbs, as you see there, has 4 separate series. Below it is Ecclesiastes, and it is put at about 250 BC, which is after Alexander the Great, but it's before the Greeks have desecrated the temple in 167. It says that it is written by a Qoheleth, who is simply one who conducts an assembly. It has been claimed to be King Solomon's, but it is not. It is influenced by Greek skepticism because it questions some of these maxims. It questions. Are the wise always blessed? Oh, really? Well, it doesn't seem so to me. And anyway, who can know the truth? Isn't truth relative to what's going on in your life? So why seek happiness? It'll all let you down. Everything is vanity. Well, with that kind of a thing, why would we go and read Ecclesiastes? We have enough of that in our life. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity, yes. It simply means don't put your whole life into this. It is only God who makes things worthwhile and enjoyable. You can't set your life into maxims or good proverbs that will always hold true. No, you better not. You better just know that God will bring everything together. In other words, there's a bit of skepticism there, but it comes out rightly. And I did have a student once who really appreciated it because she said it balances things out. It tells you, don't take yourself so seriously. Well, there's some need for that in our life, too. Up on the right, we have Ecclesiasticus, or Sirach, written about 180 BC, and this has been early in the church, in the early Christian church, used to teach catechumens how to live a Christian life, because it is a wise book. It tells you about how to live a godly life. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All of these books say that. And what is that fear of the Lord? It's being on your knees in awe at the great glory of the God of the universe. That is where it must all begin, and it's where it all ends. The fear of the Lord. If you want wisdom, that's where you begin. Then the book right below, Wisdom of Solomon, written about 50 BC. We're coming very close to the end of the Old Testament. And this is also used to instruct Christian catechumens, those just joining the church who had no background except in Greek culture, for what they were going to undertake with Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, who comes out of a Jewish background steeped in the laws of Moses, which these Greeks don't know. But they do need to know what has spun out of the law of Moses, and that is holy living. And how do you live a holy life? You live a holy life by knowing the great wisdom of the law. So, here we have a teacher, the Wisdom of Solomon, who incorporates Greek thinking, but into Hebrew theology. This is the way of thinking like God, It brings man to something of God's immortality. And the way of man is not in himself. You Greeks, you know you've been brought up in feeling that man is the center of everything. He is not. He is not in himself going anywhere. Only the Almighty God will bring him to true wholeness, to true holiness. So there is a smattering of what these books are all about. Now in the center box, we're seeing the positive things about the wisdom literature and some negative things. Actually, when we get to the book that we'll look at next week, Job, on our next lesson, I guess it is. When we look at Job, we're going to see that his friends are arguing among themselves, and some of these negatives will come out. But let's look for a moment at the positives. Certainly, when you have these sayings, these well-turned proverbs under your belt, you are going to be free from any hesitancy or any confusion about the events that happen to you, about how to handle them. You will have a positive way to deal with them because you will have it in the form of a little saying. We've used Fiddler on the Roof. Life is like that. Your foot will slip, and all your joyous music played on your fiddle will end up on the ground. So understand that this will free you from all of the dismay of why does this happen to me. You'll have a little saying that will help you understand. There's no need to figure anything out. You don't have to sit there with your hands holding your head as you vainly try to say, why has this happened to me? With those proverbs, with those maxims, you will have a love of God, because that little word will give you inner peace and joy. So those are the positive things about learning wisdom. God will make things worthwhile and enjoyable. Positive. But what about the negative? Well, those little sayings are fairly rigid. They can be intolerant. They can be entirely insufficient for the problem that arises, because really God is too big to be reduced to a little saying. Life has too many variations, and our motive can be selfishness. So we have to take a balanced approach. And balance is definitely a part of the wisdom literature. So read and enjoy. Don't leave it apart from your daily meditation and reading. Take a little bite and keep enjoying. No, God's ways cannot be reduced to a few simple sentences, though they are very helpful in times of our life when we are faced with a problem. Nevertheless, I just finished a 350-page book of the struggles of theologians in these 2 millennia to understand the Eucharist, the way of God. It has taken so much effort, so much prayer, so much research into the meaning of the Holy Eucharist that it is astounding. It's like viewing the universe through a telescope. The trillions of billions of stars, we can't reduce God to a few little sayings.